republic for which it stands, God, indivisible. Okay, thank you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the December 11th, 2014 board meeting. Are there any additions, corrections to the minutes?
I'll move approval.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the December 11th, 2014 board meetings. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The next item, item number 2, is the public comment portion of our meeting, and I want to remind everyone that this is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. If you'd like to make a public comment at this time, please come forward, state your name for the record. Okay, seeing no one. Now I'll turn to Julie for the executive officer's statement. Julie?
Good morning, Madam Chair and Member Chavarro. Actually, I'm going to not have a report this morning. We have a very long agenda, and I know we're all anxious to hear from our guest speakers, so I will skip that this morning, and Wayne and I have agreed that we will also skip the legislative update this morning, again, in the interest of time, which then probably brings us to item 4, the contract report.
Yeah, that does indeed, and I think we'll all wait for next month's report from both of you.
Okay.
So, the
contract report. Yes, I have 3 items for you this morning reporting on these contracts because they exceed $50,000 each. These are all in the IT area. I'll just read the name and dollar amount for the record, and then one motion will probably be fine. Western Blue, an NWN company, in the amount of $63,445.75. Evolve Technology Group, the amount of $57,793.32, and Pacific Business Technologies, LLC, in the amount of $77,666.09.
And just for the record, all 3 of these contracts are for hardware.
Yes, and 3-year terms on each.
Approval.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the 3 contracts as just outlined by the executive officer. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 5 on the agenda. And, item, the government claims program. So we, there's Mr. Nicholas, thank you. Mr. Wagner. Nick, thank you. Government Claims Program Manager Nicholas Wagner, would you present item number 6?
Good morning.
Or actually, the Government Claims Program. Yeah, good morning, Nick.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning, members of the board. For the record, I'm Nicholas Wagner, and I will present the Government Claims Program agenda items. Item 6 is the Government Claims Consent Agenda. It consists of 445 claims. Before the board takes action on the consent agenda, item 277 for Pamela Williams has been removed at the request of the claimant. Additionally, item 218 for Frank C. Allegre Trucking has been removed so that the claimant may address the board today. With the exception of the removed claims, staff requests that the board approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a motion for numbers 1 through 445 as amended, removing number 218 and 277?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Mr. Wagner?
Item 218 is the claim of Frank C. Allegre Trucking. Mr. Allegre seeks compensation in an amount exceeding $25,000 from the California Department of Transportation for lost profits. Program staff recommends the claim be rejected because the issues raised are complex and outside the scope of analysis and interpretation typically undertaken by the board. Representing Allegre Trucking is Mr. Allegre, and we also have Peter Accaret from Caltrans.
Okay. Gentlemen, could you please approach the table? Morning.
Morning.
Could you please, once seated, Mr. Allegre, please pronounce your name and title, if appropriate, for the record as well as Mr. Eckert. Thank you.
Frank C. Allegri with Allegri Trucking.
Good morning. Peter Accurate, attorney with the Department of Transportation, Caltrans.
Allegri, would you like to make a statement?
Yes. What we're claiming is that we had a contract with Arnell Brosmer on the I-5 project in Stockton started back in 2013. At that time, we had the contract to do their trucking, and they were in our yard on Anderson Street, which we have a big recycling yard there. They had a batch plant start up, so we had a pretty good agreement going with them. They came to me in about June or July and says, Frank, I need some help. Jay Titus with Arnell Brosmer came to me and says, I need some help. We've looked all over and we can't get rid of these grindings. Grindings is when they grind the highway up, it's the fines. They're an inch and a half, 2 inches thick. But he says they're contaminated with fabric. Nobody wanted them. So I agreed at that time, made a deal with him to haul the grindings to our location, and we would take them from there. And we agreed on a price, and we started out. And in October 26th, 27th, we hauled 2 days of grindings there. Then all of a sudden, next year they started doing the grindings again, but the engineer on the job was Harminda Dole on the job, wrote a letter to Arnell Brosmer and told them that they had to use this certain trucker, independent trucking, and then they were going to take him to the airport in Lodi because the guy at the airport wanted him. And Arminda got in the middle of our contract. And if you look down the line, all the people that was taking it or getting the grindings were all the same gender. It doesn't sound good to me. I don't believe that Caltrans has the right to come in and tell the contractor where to take the grindings or who to hire. And yet they overstep their boundary. I believe that that's just not legal. You just never saw it. I've been in business for 50.
Sir, I'm trying to sort through this. Did you say that they were of all the same, sound like gender, but did you mean grinder?
What? Gender, yes.
Gender, like female,
Yeah,
male gender.
inspect the superintendent on the job or the resident engineer, the trucker, and where they took them. We're all of the same nationality.
Nationality, not gender.
Well,
Gender's male, female.
Okay, I'm sorry. And
Just trying to make sure I'm understanding your testimony.
okay, and we the second time when they started up again, had somebody start out there grinding, and somebody else was hauling, and I drove out there and I talked to Kevin Williams, and he says, "Well, we were told that we had to do this and this and this." I said, "Since when can Caltrans get in the middle of a job that's been awarded already and tell you what to do with this stuff, unless it's in the contract?" I just have in other words, I got taken out of a project that I had all set up with Jay Titus. I had the room. I made the area for them for us to take the grindings to. I had it all done. And all of a sudden we get switched. And they just did it last week again, a very large part of grindings. So I'm here that I think they're wrong, and I'm going to have to proceed.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Eckert, do you have a statement, please?
Members of the board, I think a lot of the issues that are raised by Mr. Allegri point out that this claim contains complex issues of law and fact that are best resolved by the courts, and as such, we ask that you reject the claim.
Could you remind me of what the amount of the claim is, please, for the record?
Well, we haven't put the claim together, but it's exceeding $25,000 by a lot.
Okay.
Could be up as high as $100,000.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item?
I have a question, just for clarification purposes. You did not have a contract with Caltrans, is that correct?
We have a contract to haul it
But
on the
with
beginning of their
Caltrans?
project, and this was an extra. Okay?
But is your contract with Caltrans? That's what I'm asking
No.
you. Okay.
Contracts with, but Caltrans got in the middle of it. That's my
I
point.
understand what you're saying, and I just wanted to clarify as to whether you had
Yeah.
a contract with
No,
Caltrans.
we did not have a contract with
Okay,
Caltrans.
so Caltrans had a contract with who, RLB?
Arnell Brosmer.
All right, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions or discussions on item number 2818?
Move staff recommendation.
Okay. Okay, it's been moved and second to accept staff recommendation to reject this claim for complex reasons. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
your appearing today before us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wagner, would you please brief us on item number 7?
Item 7 it consists of 13 applications by state agencies for discharge from accountability of collection of debt, totaling $902,883.58. Program staff recommends that the board approve these requests.
Approval.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept staff recommendation on item number 7. All in favor? Aye, thank you. Okay, Mr. Wagner, let's see, item number 8 is the penal, sorry. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Wagner. Item number 8 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Stephen Hypolite. That will be presented, I believe, by our chief counsel.
Mr. Hippolyte was convicted of lewd acts upon a child under the age of 14 with great bodily injury. He was sentenced to 15 years to life. He had numerous appeals and habeas corpus writs denied. He was paroled in 2013. The hearing officer in this case recommends the denial of the claim brought under Penal Code 4900 in the proposed decision.
Okay, thank you very much. There's an appearance here today by the Attorney General. Could you
Good morning, Madam Chair. Lorenda Della Ini with the Attorney General's Office.
Is there anyone else that is going to be addressing the board on this item?
No.
Okay, would you please proceed?
Thank you. The Attorney General's Office respectfully submits that the board should adopt the hearing officer's proposed decision and reject claimant's claim for compensation pursuant to Penal Code Section 4900. The proposed decision is supported by substantial evidence and is based on an accurate statement and application of the law in this area. Indeed, claimant's conviction for committing a lewd and lascivious act on his 7-year-old foster child, infecting her with genital herpes, remains in place, and he has not established his innocence before this board. In his most recent briefing, which claimant did not send to the Attorney General's office, but the hearing officer did, claimant suggests that the proposed decision must be rejected because, 1, claimant has never claimed that he does not have herpes simplex 2, as stated in the hearing officer's determination of issues. Of course, that allegation is patently untrue, and claimant appears to be playing a game of semantics with the board. His entire claim concerns the fact that the prosecutor falsely claimed that he had genital herpes. According to the experts who testified at trial, and those transcripts were submitted to the hearing officer for consideration, herpes simplex 2 is genital herpes. Thus, the hearing officer's finding is supported by the substantial evidence. His second reason that the claimant suggests the hearing officer's proposed decision should be rejected is that the prosecutor knowingly introduced false material testimony that claimant's blood was, quote, equivocal for the herpes IgM antibody. The prosecutor presented expert testimony from Dr. Susan Plager during trial, who interpreted the blood test results and opined that the antibody was sort of in the equivocal range. The judge at that time advised the jury, of course, that they were free to reject the expert's opinion in that area and adopt a different determination of the facts. Thus, the hearing officer's determination in that regard is also supported by substantial evidence. Third, claimant suggests that the victim's sex stories are false and physically impossible because she was, quote, a pure virgin and had a mental propensity to make up false sexual molestation stories. Of course, claimant did not present a scintilla of evidence to the hearing officer suggesting that the victim was, quote, a pure virgin, or that she had mental propensity to make up such stories. Thus, the hearing officer had no evidence from which he could even consider making such a finding, and that suggestion by claimant should also be rejected. Claimant's remaining contentions about the genital herpes testing and his theory on auto-inoculation are adequately addressed by the hearing officer, and those findings are supported by substantial evidence. The bottom line is that claimant has not demonstrated that he is innocent of the lewd and lascivious act for which he was convicted of in 1997. His conviction remains in place, and no state or federal court has been willing to declare him factually innocent or grant him habeas reliefs based on the same meritless complaints that he has presented to this board. The hearing officer's proposed decision is supported by substantial evidence and is based on an accurate statement and application of the law, and therefore the Attorney General's office submits that the proposed decision should be adopted and the claim rejected.
Thank you very much, Ms. Delaney. Is there any discussion of this matter?
Staff recommendation. I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded to accept staff recommendation on item number 8. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. That was excellent testimony today. Okay, moving on to item number 9. Wayne, would you please brief us on this item?
Yes, this is the claim of Susan Mellon. Again, under Penal Code Section 4900, Miss Mellon was convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances. In September of 2014, Innocence Matters filed a petition for writ of habeas corpus asserting that the claimant was factually innocent and had been convicted entirely on false testimony and received an unfair trial when the trial prosecutor withheld exculpatory evidence and the trial defense attorney failed to provide effective representation. In October of 2014, the LA District Attorney's Office conceded the merits of this habeas petition claim. At the end of November, November 21st, 2014, the Los Angeles County Superior Court granted the claimant's writ of habeas corpus, reversing her conviction pursuant to Penal Code Section 1485.55, Division B, and that the grounds that she had conclusively established her innocence of the charges for which she had been convicted. Therefore, the hearing officer recommends in the proposed decision that the board approve and send to the legislature an appropriation be made to the claim of Susan Mellon in the amount of $597,200 for 5,972 days that she was incarcerated. Appearing for Miss Mellon is Deirdre O'Connor, the founder and executive director of Innocence Matters, and Miss Mellon is also here, along with Miss Delaney for the Attorney General's office.
Welcome each of you. For the
Good
record,
morning.
if you would restate your name again. Thank you.
Good morning. Deirdre O'Connor, Executive Director of Innocence Matters on behalf of Susan Mellon.
Susan Marie Mellon.
Ms. Mellon.
Lorenda Delaini on behalf of the Attorney General's office.
Thank you very much. Would you, either Ms. Mellon want to make a statement or on her behalf?
Well, the only statement I would like to make is to thank everybody involved in expediting this matter. As you can tell from the summary, it's been a long journey for Ms. Mellon, and anything that can be done along the way when dealing with the innocent and making it right, to do it efficiently and with all diligence is really appreciated, because as you can imagine, she's had a lot of delays and frustrations along the way.
I just want to say thank you, too. That I really appreciate what you guys are doing.
And I appreciate your appearance here before us today. Thank you. Would the Attorney General's office like to make a statement?
Yes, thank you. The Attorney General's office did not have an opportunity to investigate this matter because of the current state of the law, but does note that in the Superior Court, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office conceded that claimant could meet her burden of proving her innocence by a preponderance of the evidence under Penal Code Section 1485.55 Subdivision B. The Superior Court found her innocent, and consequently the board is mandated to recommend an appropriation to the legislature. Because claimant spent 5,972 days in state prison, the Attorney General's office agrees that the recommendation should be in the amount of $597,200.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments on this matter? I'd like to make a comment, if I could, please, to Ms. Mellon. I don't think I'm sorry on behalf of my fellow citizens of the state of California is enough, but a great injustice was indeed done, and I'm glad that justice has seen it right. And I do apologize. 5,972 days of your life was taken away unjustly, and I'm personally sorry. As chair of this board, I'm pleased that we are able to move toward the legislature for compensation. Thank you, Ms. Mellon, very much. Any other comments? It's been moved and seconded to accept staff recommendation on item number 9. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Again, thank you very much for your appearance here today.
So much. Bless you.
Okay. This closes the government claims program portion of our meeting. We'll now move to the victim compensation program portion of our agenda.
Okay, I think I'm going to introduce this. I'd like to invite the panelists who are here to come forward, and maybe staff could help if there aren't enough chairs. Board members, in November, I came before you and we had a discussion about the state of the restitution fund, kind of a review of where we've been over the last few years, and highlighted some of the more current things that are occurring in the whole environment of victims' rights and victim services. We discussed the Trauma Recovery Center grant program that we are now administering, and in fact are in our second year of making those grants. We talked about this organization's increasing role with the Office of Victims of Crime at the federal level, and the fact that we have been awarded a number of grants to work with OVC on these issues of victims' rights and victim services. Most notably, the 3-year study that we're doing on identifying underserved populations and trying to develop strategies by which more victims can access the services that are available through our program. We also discussed the statute modernization project that we had underway at that time, where we were engaging stakeholders in conversations about our governing statutes and looking for ways to ensure that our statutes were keeping pace with changes in our environment and making sure that the statutes enable us to reach the victims that need to be reached with the kinds of services that they need in order to achieve recovery. At that time, I suggested to you that we would like to convene a panel discussion, and we had hoped to do that in December. Unfortunately, the one rainstorm that we've had this season precluded us from moving forward with that plan, and I want to say thank you to all of the panelists, those on the phone and those here today, for their understanding, and many of them have expressed appreciation to us for postponing that discussion from December 11th to today so that all could participate and travel here safely. The idea for this morning is to have this group of experts engage the board in conversation about how we're currently providing services to victims of violent crime, and to begin exploring ideas, concepts, etc., on how we might look toward the future to ensure that our service models are the most effective and efficient in delivering those needed services. So I want to thank the participants who are on the phone with us. Hopefully our technology will allow us to have a seamless and robust conversation. Each of the panelists has been asked to make a brief statement about the work that they're currently engaged in and kind of where they see their own models going, evolving, challenges that they're facing, and then just engage in an overall discussion about next steps and how we continue this very important conversation. So let me begin by introducing the panelists, and I'm going to just go in the order that they're listed in the agenda, and that will allow us to hear from the current recipients of our TRC grants first, followed by two very distinguished members of our community involved in family justice centers. First, Dr. Bita Ghafouri, who is the director of the Long Beach Trauma Recovery Center and is a coordinator of marriage and family therapy program professor at Cal State Long Beach. Jennifer Young, who is on the phone with us, is the program director of special services for Groups Trauma Recovery Center in Los Angeles. Dr. Alicia Barcelleri, Director of Psychosocial Medicine at the University of California, San Francisco Trauma Recovery Center, is with us here in Sacramento. On the phone is the Honorable Nancy O'Malley, District Attorney of Alameda County and the leader and founder of the Alameda County Family Justice Center. Also at the table this morning is Casey Gwynn. Casey is the president of the National Family Justice Center Alliance. Casey is going to share with us his work, which began in San Diego and now reaches across the country. So my thanks to all of you for being present here today, and we're all looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. This really is exciting for me and for the board. We've been looking forward to hearing from each of you, and I'm so pleased that you've been willing to give of your time. I know how precious it is, and you are all so distinguished that I'm honored that you are giving of your time to better inform us. Julie and I have been talking about this for many months, and so the day has finally arrived, even though I know we had a hiccup on December 11th. But for those on the phone, can you hear all right? Is everything coming through to you? Great. Super. So, Julie,
All right.
shall we proceed?
Yes, I think maybe we could have Bita begin.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Bita Ghafouri. I'm from California State University, Long Beach.
Mike, a little closer for you, I think, just because of the telephone. Thank you.
I'm from California State University, Long Beach, and the Long Beach Trauma Recovery Center. It's my pleasure today to describe to you a little bit about what the Long Beach Trauma Recovery Center is currently doing. We are a university-based team of mental health professionals who are working collaboratively with local partners to serve a diverse group of victims of crime and violence. We have many partners, and some of them include the police, the prosecutor's office, our local hospitals, community-based agencies, and the local schools, colleges, and universities. Our service delivery model is based off of the UCSF model, primarily, and our goal is to provide services in an efficient manner, and this includes direct mental health services, psychotherapy, as well as psychiatric services, case management, crisis counseling, shelter referrals, safety planning, linkages to medical care, education and outreach services to the community, coordination of care between victims, between professionals serving victims of crime, assistance with the CalVCP application process, and training to law enforcement on the effects of crime. We provide a training program to master's level students who are studying counseling, marriage, family therapy, and social work. And we train the next generation of mental health providers in current evidence-based approaches to mental health care. As a university-based center with experts in the field of traumatic stress on staff, we are also conducting research on the efficacy of our services and our model. In terms of the reasons behind what we do, as we all know, there are many barriers to serving underserved victims of crime and violence, including stigma, the prohibitive costs, transportation, childcare. We aim to remove some of these known barriers to mental health care. We provide education, outreach, and intervention services to the most underserved, including racial and ethnic minorities, the poor, and the uninsured. Long Beach, in particular, has a very disproportionately high number of individuals who have experienced trauma, violence, and loss. We have double the incidences of sexual assault in Long Beach compared to other areas of LA County. We have 4 times the rate of domestic violence in Long Beach compared to other areas of LA County, and human trafficking is a significant concern in Long Beach. Many individuals that we have seen over the course of the last 7 months have experienced complex and chronic trauma. The average number of traumas for the individuals that we've seen, and we've seen about 200, is 6 traumas during the course of their time until they get to us. So our mission is to create a better quality of life for these individuals by bringing mental health care advocacy and outreach and education, as well as services to these diverse victims of crime and their families. Our vision for the future includes to serve as many individuals as we can, to continue to strengthen our partnerships with the police, the DA, and the community agencies, as well as service providers. In terms of working with the Family Justice Center model, I do believe it may be beneficial for us to potentially work with the Family Justice Centers in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ghafouri. Julie, would you like us to engage in questions, or go through all of our participants'
Maybe if you have specific questions about the Long Beach program, it might be appropriate, but maybe otherwise have more of a general discussion after everyone's shared.
I do have a question, Dr. Ghafouri, about how many people are you serving annually?
So we have been open for 7 months at this point, and we've served approximately 200 individuals so far.
And they find their way to you through primarily law enforcement agencies and victims advocacy groups?
We've been looking at who our referral sources, and yes, the law enforcement and advocacy groups do refer to us, but the local hospitals have been a big referral source to us as well. So from a variety of groups.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry that your rate of domestic violence, that's bad, 4 times the rate of other areas of Southern California. Okay. Do you have any other questions, or Rick or Mike? Are you hearing everything okay? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll engage further after all the presentations. All right.
Shall we ask Jennifer Young now to share her thoughts with us?
Thank you, Ms. Young. I have a question. Do you serve geographically LA County? Or okay. And you said you've been in operation about 9 months. Or am I mixing Long Beach up with LA? How long have you been in service? I'm sorry, Ms. Young. Since April. Okay, almost a year then. Yeah. Okay. Now, sorry, I should probably know this, but you were formed how? Obviously, there was a great need. There's more needs than we can meet, obviously, sadly. But how were you formed? Okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Dr. Alicia Basilari.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Alicia Basilari, and I'm the director of the UCSF Trauma Recovery Center. I'd like to thank the board for giving me a chance to talk to you about the TRC. The Trauma Recovery Center was created in 2001 in partnership with the Victim Compensation Program. We were able to collaborate closely during the 4-year period when we received our initial block grant. The leadership of the Victim Compensation Program were active partners with us as we developed the model of care that I'll be talking about today, and much of what has been accomplished over the years at TRC would not have been possible without the help of the board and without the support of the state legislature. Based on this 4-year demonstration project, as you know, in July of 2013, the state enacted SB 71, which has resulted in the creation of additional trauma recovery centers in Long Beach and Los Angeles. The UCSF model that has been developed has been empirically shown to be more accessible to victims of violent crime, as well as more clinically effective and more cost-effective than customary care. We see some of San Francisco's most vulnerable individuals who are victims of violent crime. These include sexual assaults, domestic violence, gunshot injuries, human trafficking, and family members of homicide victims. The center serves people from all walks of life. However, most of the people we serve are poor and without resources. Violence and poverty go hand in hand. The TRC model uses a flexible and comprehensive approach in treating victims of crime. This approach emphasizes assertive community outreach, clinical case management, and evidence-based trauma-focused mental health services. We coordinate care across medical, legal, social services, and we work closely with our community partners and with law enforcement. Although we accept referrals throughout San Francisco, and particularly from law enforcement, many of our clients are identified at San Francisco General. Because San Francisco General is a level 1 trauma center, all of the major physical injuries in terms of violent crime, the shootings and sexual assaults and domestic violence cases are brought to the hospital. Our staff approaches these clients either in the emergency department or after they have been admitted to the hospital with injuries related to their violent crime. We approach them at their bedside. When we first began this work, we naively thought that everyone would want our mental health services. As it turns out, this was not the case for many reasons related to shame, embarrassment, and also the stigma around mental health services. Many people do not initially want mental health treatment. We also know that trauma by its very nature drives people into isolation and withdrawal and avoidance, and yet people cannot heal from post-traumatic stress disorder unless they are given a chance to have some mental health services. But our model of care, we basically meet people where they are. We tell them that they don't need to talk about what happened, but we can help them with other practical things, such as finding safe housing. If a client is too afraid or too disabled to come to us, we go to them. We go into people's apartments, hotel rooms, the projects, and homeless encampments. This is a stepped care model, a single point of contact with a trauma specialist who collaborates with clients to initially focus on safety and stabilization. This is in contrast to some other models where the responsibilities are divided between different staff across different agencies. In our model, a single clinician with support of the rest of the team provides assertive outreach, case management, evidence-based psychotherapy, advocacy, and substance abuse treatment. This ensures coordination across various systems of care, and as a result, victims are not likely to fall through the cracks. Some of the case management services we offer include help with victim compensation applications and entitlements, other financial entitlements, arranging for safe housing, linkages to medical care, filing police reports, linking with the district attorney and the San Francisco Police Department, and also assisting linkage with religious communities and assistance with returning to work. The mental health services include crisis debriefing, crisis intervention, psychoeducation, time-limited, evidence-based individual and group psychotherapy, medication management, family work. The TRC serves more than 700 patients a year, and we provide services in more than 13 languages. We also work closely with our community partners. A randomized treatment trial demonstrated that the TRC model is clinically and cost-effective. For example, our results demonstrate that this model is successful in engaging victims in mental health services. We found that 77% of people receiving our services engaged in mental health treatment when compared to 34% of victims who received customary care. We have also found out that our services cost about 34% less than those receiving traditional mental health services. And finally, it's important to mention that timely treatment does help people heal from the devastating effects of violence. In fact, part of what is so gratifying about the work we do is seeing how many of our clients, despite tremendous obstacles, are able to use this traumatic event in a positive way as a turning point to make important changes in their lives. It's been an honor to be part of this process. And I just want to say one other thing. In sitting here and hearing Beta and Jennifer talk about their centers, and if you just add up the numbers, we're really talking about, I think it comes to more than 700 new patients over the last 7 to 9 months that have now received mental health services because of the support of the board in creating these centers. And I think really that's what it's about, is creating additional access. And I think, I really, again, thank you so much for supporting this effort.
Thank you, and it's very nice to see you again. We had a very good visit to the trauma center when we were in San Francisco. Gosh, I guess that was last summer already. So thank you for your presentation. Excellent. And as you're stepping through it, I'm stepping through the clinic and the briefing you gave us on site. So I can visualize as well as learn from your presentation today. So I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rick or Mike, any questions? Okay, go on to the... Yep, absolutely.
All right, I think now we'll switch to the topic of family justice centers. And Honorable Nancy O'Malley from Alameda County. Are you ready, Nancy? All right. Nancy, can I just interrupt you briefly? You were coming through quite clearly, and we seem to have lost the volume a bit. Volume's off, too. A little better.
Yep, I think you're going to be right into the phone.
Thank you. Oh, that's great.
Much better. That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. Rick or Mike, do you have any questions of the district attorney? And the amount of people you are serving and the efficiency, it sounds, by which you are serving them is really, really fascinating and to be congratulated. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Julie?
Thank you, Nancy. Casey Gwynn is going to share some experience, and I think we have some photos or video that he's also going to share with you.
Yeah, no, I'll be able to see. I guess folks will be able to see this as well?
I believe the cameras
anybody's
will
watching the stream?
allow this to be
Okay.
streamed. Yeah.
I'm worried you don't have a mic on, so you'll be okay?
It may or may not work. It plugged, it
Okay.
shut down my computer there. The state might not like Macs.
Well, we got something going here.
Well, good morning. It's an honor to be with you, and I appreciate Nancy being able to share. My name is Casey Gwynn. I'm honored to serve as the president of the National Family Justice Center Alliance. This year is my 30th year working in the field of violence prevention and child abuse and sexual assault and domestic violence work. I began my career as a prosecutor in San Diego in 1985 and never imagined that I'd be sitting here, quite frankly, or anywhere else around the country talking about these issues. I am, too, a survivor of significant childhood trauma. I never realized it growing up. I went to Stanford University and UCLA School of Law, became a prosecutor in San Diego, and it was in that journey that I started to do business with some of my own issues, having grown up in a family with violence and abuse. So it's become very personal to me over the years. I'm going to just do a little show and tell about the Family Justice Center movement. This will be like a speed dating exercise because each of our comments have been relatively brief. But I just want to show you a little bit about the work. I think the Trauma Recovery Center work is incredible and impressive, and the reality is that there's so many different models and so many different approaches, and they're all critical, and they all play different roles in the way communities and society addresses these issues, both at the top of the cliff, where we should be doing most of our addressing of issues around that cause trauma, or at the bottom of the cliff, where we have to deal with trauma that has already occurred. But there is a lot of life and death in all of it, and I'm going to flip through most of this except to tell you that Family Justice Center movement has been very focused on the issue of domestic violence homicides in America. That's really where we started. Our primary goal was homicide prevention. Getting in front of it, intervening to the point that we don't have children or women or men that end up dying in family violence. I always honor one of those women in every presentation I ever do. This is Rose Javero. Rose was in a vegetative state for 8 years in San Diego after being shot in the head in Las Vegas, Nevada. She was brought home to be with her family, and she spent 8 years in a vegetative state. She died on May 21st of 2014 at Sharp Coronado Rehab Hospital of pneumonia. She had been stalked. She had left her husband and gone into hiding, and after stalking her for 2 months, he shot her in the head. She lived for 8 years before she died. Rose is somebody that we got to be very involved in supporting her family after she was placed in the hospital. We're also very focused on the children. These are Misak Dumas's children. He killed all 5 of them, slit their throats. Misak Dumas is now serving life in prison without possibility of parole. But I will tell you that the failure in this community was there were 11 agencies involved with this family before the Dumas children died, and none of the agencies were talking to each other. None of the agencies were working together. They were all siloed and separate and doing their own thing. Child welfare, domestic violence, community-based agencies, sexual assault, community-based agencies, law enforcement agencies, the court system. Those children died because the community failed in coming together to prevent this before it happened. The other thing that drives us in the Family Justice Center work is some of the most interesting, latest research on the impact of childhood trauma on children witnessing domestic violence. This study just came out of Sam Houston University. They studied children for 20 years who were growing up in homes where there had been some form of intimate partner violence between adults in the home. And after 20 years, they concluded that children from 3 of the 4 families ended up becoming victims as adults, and children from 4 of the 5 families ended up becoming perpetrators as adults. So in America, we raise our criminals at home, and in many cases, we raise our victims at home as well because of the impacts of childhood trauma. And this is Ronald Wayne Fry. He was executed August 31st of 2001 in North Carolina. He killed his landlord in a rent dispute. Nobody would connect that to child abuse or domestic violence. This is Ronald Wayne Fry when he was 9 years old. His picture was in the training manual for North Carolina law enforcement on how to recognize child abuse the day that he was executed by lethal injection in North Carolina. This is where we win and lose the battle of dealing with generational violence and abuse. This is one of the most recent studies. I'm just publishing a new book with the support of Dr. Vincent Felitti, who's the author of what's called the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. This is one of the most recent studies. It's hard to read, but it's a study by a psychiatrist in San Diego focused on the ACE scores, the Adverse Childhood Experience scores, trauma scores, if you will, of domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual assault offenders. Without getting into too much detail there, I can tell you that the majority of them had a score on a scale of 10 of well over 4. In the average population, you're going to find less than 12% of the population has a score over 4. There's no surprise that there's a connection to virtually every child abuser, virtually every domestic violence abuser, and most sexual offenders to childhood trauma and abuse. Police officers die because of childhood trauma and abuse. This is Paul Starzyk. He was a Martinez police officer. He died in 2008 responding to a domestic violence call. He died at this scene in Martinez where I visited 4 months after this murder happened. He died while saving the life of a domestic violence victim, her 3 children, and 2 other women in an apartment on the 2nd floor of that apartment building. We now track every law enforcement officer in America that dies at the hand or at the gun of someone who has a history of child abuse and domestic violence. We believe that the majority of law enforcement officers in America who are being killed today are being killed by men, almost entirely men, who have a history of childhood trauma related to child abuse and domestic violence. We've done 2 studies in the last year. The first was in Boise, Idaho, where we looked at officer-involved critical incidents. These are men that were either shot a police officer or were shot by a police officer. You can see 80% of the criminal suspects had a domestic violence history. 30% of them, however, had a strangulation assault history against a woman before they ended up in a violent confrontation with law enforcement. We then just replicated this, and this is just a Public Records Act study. We just replicated this in Riverside County last year, and we found that 50% of the officers who were killed over a 20-year period were killed by a man who either had, 80% of them had a domestic violence history, but what was more interesting to us was that 50% of them had a prior history of strangulation assault against a woman. Men who strangle women end up killing police officers. They often end up killing women and children as well. But this link is now being studied by the National Institutes of Justice in a new developing study right now. We'd never seen this before in this detail anywhere in the country. These are judges die in domestic violence. This is a juvenile court judge, the most recent judge in America to be killed by a ward of the juvenile court who grew up in a child abuse and domestic violence home. The killer was 15. I just wanted to make a few comments today about a couple of themes. I think the big conversation that we think the Crime Victim Compensation Board should be having is, what's the framework for really bringing communities together around both prevention and intervention, around both the intervention piece with chronic trauma or acute trauma, as the case may be, and what's the intervention system that connects to the long-term hope and healing piece? Right now, most agencies in California and most agencies in America are siloed. The cops are over here, the prosecutors are over here, the therapists are over here, the shelters are over here, short-term housing is here, long-term housing is here, education services are over here. You start adding up all those places and you've got a lot of places to go. I want to show a couple of things real quick. I'll just skip through some of these. We just opened the first center in Sweden. Family justice centers are now in 20 different countries around the world. We have 90 centers in the U.S. But I really liked this slide. This is Hässleholm, Sweden, which is outside of Malmö, Sweden. They were so excited that they had mapped how victims of violence and abuse get help in their community. They solved it. This is how we do it. And the realization of that is nobody's going to navigate that. You want to put somebody with trauma, dealing with terror and violence, they'll never make it through any of that. I will say, though, I'm not just picking on the child welfare movement or the domestic violence movement or the sexual assault movement. I just presented this slide at Rutgers University at the National Feminist Symposium, and a very impressive graduate student came up to me and she said, it's not just true of child abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, all of that. It's true of everybody. And she handed me this slide, which was the U.S. war strategy in Afghanistan that had been published in the New York Times. And she said, see, everybody puts complicated solutions on top of things and thinks that's going to solve the problem. So I promised her I would show this slide. I don't want to make a comment about wars in foreign countries. All I want to point out is that she was right, that the complexities exist everywhere in every system, and it's almost impossible to help people when you're looking at that right there. The vision of the Family Justice Center Alliance, our national organization, this is our vision statement. You can see that it focuses, as Nancy mentioned, on this piece around crisis intervention, but it also focuses on this long-term piece of how we get to hope and healing. I always joke that when you have a vision, it means that other people are following you, and when you have a hallucination, it means that you're all alone. The difference between a vision and a hallucination is the number of people who see it. So if you see something and nobody else sees it, you are hallucinating. But if everybody sees the same thing, you can change things. And I think that's the challenge of this board, is how can you move the conversation forward at the state level that we all see the same thing? We all see how trauma recovery centers interface with community-based agencies, interface with cops and prosecutors, how the criminal justice system and the juvenile justice system and the family court system interface with each other, how the health community interfaces. That's our big challenge in all of this. This is our world. If you don't know our world, you can see it at familyjusticecenter.com. We support 90 centers around the country. About 20 of those centers have federal funding. Most of those centers are privately funded or have a mix of local government money and private money, which is true of the Alameda County Family Justice Center. I just want to say, as Mike mentioned, Nancy O'Malley is leading the largest, most comprehensive family justice center in California today. I was honored to start the first family justice center in California in San Diego in 2002. Nancy O'Malley took our dream and put it on steroids in Alameda County. And it's far more robust than we ever even envisioned that a family justice center could be in San Diego. But just a little bit about the Alliance. We are driven by guiding principles. These were guiding principles that were developed with a group of trauma survivors. We're very committed to the notion of accountability to survivors. Survivors originally picked the name of the Family Justice Center. Today, as the Family Justice Center movement's going around the country, survivors in focus groups are picking different names. The biggest center in America, I'll show you a quick picture of, is called Safe Place, because survivors didn't want to see the word justice or center. They just wanted it to be called One Safe Place. It's called that too in Redding, California, where a shelter and community-based agencies just merged into a campus model in Redding in Shasta County, and it too is called One Safe Place. So I would say the focus areas in our 90 family justice centers in the U.S. and our 17 centers in California right now really are in these areas. We're giving a lot of thought to who can we partner with that connects to this trauma-informed piece, because the work that the trauma recovery centers are doing it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. The challenge is scalability, and the challenge is numbers. In family justice centers right now, we're serving between 35 and 40,000 survivors and their kids every year in our 17 existing centers. And we can't meet all the needs. You have too much at the bottom of the cliff to meet all of those needs. So we're looking a lot at what partners can come together. The Family Justice Center shouldn't be doing the work. They're just a framework for pulling everybody together in a community, preferably led from a county government level. And you can see we're looking a lot about this issue of office space and locations and campuses. We do host a conference every year. This year our conference is entitled Health Matters, Hope Heals, What Every Professional Needs to Know About Trauma. We're doing it in partnership with the National Center for Trauma-Informed Care. That's part of what's called SAMHSA and the federal government. And we're giving a lot of thought to these topics. We also run what's called the Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention, and you can see why from our earlier stats why we're so focused on dealing with both survivors of strangulation assaults. Many women are strangled in criminal assault cases and don't even know that they've suffered permanent brain damage from that assault, and nobody's even screening them for the potential of anoxic brain injury, having been, quote, choked, unquote, in a sexual assault case or a domestic violence case. We've published 9 books over the last 9 years about the Family Justice Center movement. As I mentioned, I have a new book coming out. My passion in life right now is the children. I'm convinced that we have to focus on getting services and support to the children, and we have to break the cycle there. Otherwise, we're going to be having the same conversation 10 years from now and 20 years from now. We produce a lot of things. We have specialized smartphone apps that relate to our various pieces of work. We just published the first book in America on handling strangulation. And then we are going through a rebranding process right now to create this new umbrella. But I wanted to talk just a little bit about evidence-based practices. I think everything that the Crime Victim Board talks about in this, make sure you're talking to folks, as you are with the trauma recovery centers, talking to folks that have evidence-based outcomes, that really are doing trauma-informed work. I would love to see processes come in place with this board that in the future set up better third-party billing processes to get people who are working in collaboratives to be able to provide their services for free, then get reimbursed if the payer of last resort is the Crime Victim Compensation Board, instead of, for example, what's happening right now. A crime victim comes into a hospital or doesn't want to get transported by an ambulance because she's scared to death she's going to get a bill for that ambulance from a private ambulance company, from a local service provider, from the hospital, and she can't afford it. And she's a crime victim. She shouldn't have to afford it. There should be a process set up that if certain standards are followed, if the board is the payer of last resort, that victim should not have money having to come out of her pocket in order to go forward for services, because then they're not getting the medical services that they need. And the vast majority of victims of violence and abuse hospital emergency rooms. All of our studies say the vast majority of victims aren't going to ERs. And when they do go, it's because that's their primary health care. They don't have health insurance. And so they go there for their basic medical needs because they can't afford anything else. I do think this notion of big frameworks, whether you call them family justice centers or other kinds of collaboratives, is the future. Eric Holder just said this in Washington, D.C. He said family justice centers were the future of community-oriented policing in America. And I agree with that statement. We're never going to arrest or prosecute our way out of all of this. We've got to figure out better collaboratives to bring together police and prosecutors and advocates and mental health professionals. And then finally, I just want a quick show and tell. These are the 2 leading models in America. I said Nancy had the leading model in California. We just opened this campus in Fort Worth, Texas. This is the future. This is one safe place in Fort Worth, Texas. There are 50 agencies collaborating in this project: government, non-government, faith-based community, community-based agencies, trauma-informed care services, mental health professionals. It's a stunning campus that just opened. This is the more interesting forebearer, if you will, of the future. This is the Sojourner Truth Family Peace Center that is currently under construction in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And they're putting emergency shelter housing and transitional housing into this campus. It's a 70,000 square foot campus. I hope in the future that government agencies, policymakers start bringing together these campus models, these community models, where you're not just coming there for crisis, you're not just coming there for trauma counseling. This is a community that you can begin to belong to. And the public can rally around it, and the government can rally around it, and we can do better social change work, I believe, if we have a situs, if we have a hub on which the work can be done. I'll go ahead, I think, and stop there. I could talk a little bit about our national and international work, too, but I'll stop there. I will mention one other thing that's near and dear to my heart. Some of you may know we run the first statewide camping program in America for children exposed to violence and abuse. It's called Camp Hope, California. We bring every year about 500 children to camp up on the Oregon border. Our teenage children coming to camp just took the Adverse Childhood Experience Questionnaire this summer under the supervision of Dr. Vincent Felitti, the author of the ACE study. And our average score was a little over 6 on a scale of 10. When you're a 6 on the ACE score, it means your life expectancy is going to go down 20 years. And you're going to suffer from the probabilities go way up of you suffering from very significant impacts if you don't have mitigating support from trauma professionals. If you can't ameliorate or mitigate those impacts, you're in big trouble in life. And the prisons of California are populated with those kids because they grew up and didn't get the help they needed. And now we lock them up and spend $50,000 a year to put them in prison. So I'll go ahead and stop there. I appreciate the chance to share with you, and we look forward to more dialogue on the whole topic of frameworks for collaboration and ultimately what we envision, which is integration. The notion that you really start doing the work together. You just don't sit in a building together, or you just don't show up at meetings together. It's not just referrals or linkages. It's really intertwining your agencies, your lives, in order to change outcomes for survivors and their kids. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Casey. This has been educational, inspiring. I have for years felt so strongly that we had to focus on the children to break the cycle. I so agree. I mean, and our jails and prisons are full of people that sadly that didn't happen for. But anyway, thank you very, very much. Rick, Mike, any questions of Casey?
Thanks, Mike.
Do you know, Casey, either in Fort Worth or in Milwaukee, the funding streams for the two centers that you gave as examples?
They're really all public-private funding models.
Yeah.
Milwaukee's about 50-50. Fort Worth is about 60% private, 40% public. It really varies around the country. San Diego is about 90% City of San Diego money and about 10% private fundraising. Alameda County, Nancy would have to answer that. I don't know what their mix of public-private funding is. I know the county's fully engaged in Alameda County, and I actually that's a better model than San Diego. I was the elected city attorney when we opened it. The district attorney of San Diego County at the time didn't support the model, so we couldn't engage the county in 2002 when we opened. But it's actually better to do this at a county level than it is at a city level.
Yeah, well, that's where the services are, so they're closer to the people. But I'm also I'm going to do some research on both those centers, because the Milwaukee Center, I think it's fascinating that you have some type of residence there as well.
And I've got, I'll leave these for you. I brought one of our books, and I brought we had a study commissioned by the legislature, the California legislature, 2 years ago, and we were seeking to codify family justice centers in state law in California. So Noreen Evans and Lonnie Hancock and others wanted us to do this study. Blue Shield of California funded it. This is the entire study. I also have executive summaries of the study that they're very findings about. They studied 4 family justice centers in California. So I'll make those available to you as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Well, this has been so helpful and so educational and a lot of food for thought. One of the things that always traumatizes me, if I can use that word, coming to the board meetings is just, all of these people that we make judgment about. There's a whole trail of problems behind and with them. And it just, I share that with the staff here all the time. I have a sleepless night before the meeting, and I have trouble the day of the meeting because we're just one little tiny piece. And these are broken and troubled lives. And you just don't even, I have a hard time comprehending how people get in the situations they get into. And our compensation or ability to compensate is so small in terms of what is needed. So I really thank you. I don't know if the district attorney is still on the line, but Nancy, I don't think I've had the pleasure of meeting you yet. I look forward to it and visiting your center. And again, thank you for the work you're doing every day. Bless you for it because it's hard. And we need many, many more of you because we have so many more victims. But thank you very much. Absolutely. It takes a village. It does in terms of funding and then, of course, services. So again, thank you all. Julie, do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
I think you spoke very well for us, but just my personal thanks to all of you and to my staff for making this presentation possible. And hopefully this is really just the beginning of the conversation, and we will continue to engage the folks here and broaden the conversation as we can to bring more stakeholders into it. So Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for traveling here, and thank you for dealing with the telephones, too. Thanks. Have a good day. All right. The board will now convene into the closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126C3 to discuss numbers 1 through 65 on the agenda. Thank you all.